Today, we're diving into a massive turning point in history. We're talking about how, in just a few short decades, the United States went from a nation mostly concerned with itself to a full-blown global powerhouse. So how in the world did that happen so fast? Let's unpack this incredible transformation. We're going to see how a country completely focused on its own frontier suddenly turned its gaze to the rest of the world, and in doing so, changed everything. And you know, the whole story really kicks off right here, with this one sentence. It sounds kind of dry, right? But this official declaration in 1890 was a bombshell. For 100 years, America's identity was all about expanding west, and suddenly, it was over. The frontier was officially closed. So you gotta ask, what happens when a nation built on expansion runs out of room?
Well, it looks outward. With nowhere left to go on the continent, a whole new set of powerful ideas and ambitions started bubbling up, pushing America out onto the world stage whether it was ready or not.
It wasn't just one thing that caused this shift. It was more like a perfect storm. From an economic standpoint, American factories were just making too much stuff. They needed new customers. Militarily, if you're going to have a big, modern navy, you need bases all over the world. Plus, with the frontier gone, there was this feeling, this restlessness that America's destiny was to just keep growing. And wrapping it all up was this powerful and pretty troubling ideological belief that it was America's mission to go out and civilize the rest of the world.
And I mean, you can hear that ideology loud and clear from people like Senator Alfred Beveridge. He wasn't talking about expansion as an option. He framed it as a divine mission from God. It was America's job, in his view, to rule over what he called savage peoples. The language is, frankly, shocking to hear today, but back then this was an incredibly powerful and popular idea.
Then you had Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, who put a slightly different spin on it. For him, it was a race, a global competition for power and land. The great European empires were carving up the globe, and he argued that America absolutely could not afford to get left behind in that line of march. And it's so important to understand what's fueling both of these arguments. It's this popular and, frankly, dangerous philosophy called social Darwinism. This idea took Darwin's survival of the fittest and just slapped it onto nations and races. It basically gave a scientific-sounding excuse for powerful countries to dominate weaker ones.
So, all this talk, this new imperialist mindset, it wasn't going to stay theoretical for very long. Nope, it was about to be put to the ultimate test in a conflict that basically exploded right on America's doorstep, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And man, when things started happening, they happened fast. First, you had what was called yellow journalism. Newspapers publishing these wild, sensational stories about Spanish cruelty in Cuba that got the American public all fired up. Then, a private letter gets leaked where a Spanish official calls the U.S. president weak. And then, the final spark. The American battleship USS Maine blows up in Havana Harbor. To this day, we don't know why, but the papers immediately screamed, "Remember the Maine! To hell with Spain!" And that was it. The public demanded war.
The war itself was over in a flash. It was incredibly one-sided. And when the dust settled, Spain's huge, centuries-old empire just crumbled. Cuba got its independence, kinda, but look what the U.S. walked away with. Guam, Puerto Rico, and, for a cool $20 million, the entire Philippine Islands. In just a few months, without really planning for it, America had stumbled into owning an overseas empire.
Okay, so America is officially a world power, and it wasted absolutely no time in starting to flex its new muscles and assert its influence, from the huge markets in Asia all the way to its own backyard. Let's start over in China. By the time the U.S. was really looking to get in on the action, the major powers in Europe and Japan had already carved China up into what they called spheres of influence. Basically, they'd each claimed a piece to the pie and locked down exclusive trading rights. So, what does America do? It comes up with a pretty brilliant diplomatic move, the open door policy. The Secretary of State just declared that, hey, everybody should have equal access to trade with China. It sounds really fair and high-minded, doesn't it? But what it was really about was prying that door open for American businesses so the U.S. wouldn't be locked out of that huge, lucrative Chinese market. Pretty clever.
And if you want to see just how far America was willing to push its newfound power, look no further than the Panama Canal. The U.S. wanted to build a canal through Colombia, but Colombia said no. So what did the U.S. do? It supported a revolution, helped create the brand new country of Panama, and what do you know? The new country immediately gave the U.S. the rights to build its canal. This one move would literally change global trade and military strategy forever.
But this new role as a global player was about to face its biggest test yet. Because over in Europe, the great powers were about to trip and fall into the absolute chaos of the First World War, and America was going to have to pick a side.
For years, the U.S. really tried to stay neutral, but its economy was just too tied up with the Allies. Then German U-boats started sinking any ship they saw, including passenger liners like the Lusitania, which killed over 100 Americans and caused massive public outrage. But the absolute final straw was the Zimmermann telegram, a secret message from Germany to Mexico promising to help Mexico get back Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona if it attacked the U.S. After that, there was no turning back. In 1917, America was at war.
Now, this war didn't just happen over there. It radically remade American society right here at home. With millions of men off to fight, someone had to work in the factories. This need for workers helped fuel the Great Migration, with hundreds of thousands of African Americans moving from the rural South to industrial cities in the North. At the same time, millions of women were pulled into the workforce, taking on jobs that had never been open to them before. It was a massive social shift.
But this huge national effort had a really dark side. The government passed laws, the Espionage and Sedition Acts, that basically made it a crime to criticize the war, the draft, or the government. In effect, disagreeing with the war became illegal.
And what's more, the Supreme Court backed it up. In a famous case, the court said that free speech isn't absolute. They created this new legal standard. Speech can be limited if it creates a clear and present danger to the country. It was a landmark decision that we're still debating today.
So when the guns in Europe finally fell silent, America found itself facing a whole new set of challenges, trying to forge a lasting peace abroad, while dealing with all the fear and paranoia the war had unleashed at home.
President Wilson went to the peace talks with this big idealistic vision called the 14 Points. It was all about a fair peace and creating a League of Nations to make sure a war like this never happened again. But the other allies? They wanted revenge. The final Treaty of Versailles was all about punishing Germany. And then, in the ultimate ironic twist, the U.S. Senate refused to even let America join Wilson's own League of Nations.
And the end of the war sure didn't bring peace and quiet back home. Not even close. The communist revolution in Russia sparked this intense, nationwide panic that radicals were trying to take over America. It became known as the First Red Scare.
And this fear had real, devastating consequences. The government launched what were called the Palmer Raids, arresting thousands of suspected communists and anarchists, often with little to no evidence. Anti-immigrant feelings, which were already simmering, just exploded. And in response, Congress passed sweeping new laws that put strict quotas on immigration, basically slamming the door shut to millions of people, especially from Southern and Eastern Europe, for decades to come.
So just step back and think about it. In about 30 years, America completely remade itself, going from a regional player to a global empire. It fought in a world war and totally reshaped its own society. And as the country tried to pull back from the world stage in the 1920s, you have to ask, could it really leave all that new power and all those new fears behind? Or were the consequences of this incredible transformation just getting started?